Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 11, Feats of Clay. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. So Clay and his friends steal a cursed urn from Egypt and brings it back and tries to have Prue sell it at the auction house. However, because of the curse, both of his friends die, and then he decides to give himself up to the curse, having learnt his lesson and having not been aware of the curse when he stole it. And this is when Phoebe then arrives to try to protect him, and he instead prevents her from being hurt and protects her, which is a selfless act that ends up freeing Clay from the curse by his own actions. And then in the subplots, we have Piper dealing with a clumsy waitstaff named Doug, who had been broken up with by his girlfriend Shelley. Just as he was about to propose to her, Piper tries a spell to give him extra confidence. It works a little too well. She undoes it. He continues to break things. And at the end of the episode, Prue decides to basically take the engagement ring, put it down on the ground so that when all of the dishes fall, the ring is among it, the mess, and then Shelley picks it up, realizes what it is, and Doug confesses that he'd had it for weeks, trying to find the right time to ask. And this is when Shelley starts to tear up a bit and says that the only reason she actually broke up with him was because she was tired of waiting for him to take that next step. And so we assume a happy ending for them. And then Prue meets her new boss now that Rex and Hannah were defeated in the last episode. The auction house is taken over by the bank, and Claire is sent by the bank to decide whether or not the auction house is worth saving, and sets Prue a task of earning $1.2 million on an auction the next day in order for it to stay open, which she does do successfully, though her reputation with the boss is mixed. On the one hand, she accomplishes the task, but on the other hand, she does almost sell a stolen urn because of the plot between Clay and his friends. They go to Prue to sell the urn. And then after we watch an episode on this channel, we rank the episode against the other episodes, and we do it on two lists. The first one is the mostly objective list, which is set values, void of emotion, to kind of get like a general idea of what the episode is worth. And then the personal ranking, which is just like my enjoyment of the episode, basically the list where we do put in the emotion into the ranking. And as always, I start with the mostly objective ranking first. And in this episode, we have several positives and we also have several, well, not several, but a couple of negatives. So to start off with the small points, we have our single episode supporting character, which is Clay Muniz, who is an ex of Phoebe's from New York, who has gone, as mentioned in the summary, gone to Egypt, stolen a cursed urn, and brought it back to, well, basically he starts to try to rekindle with Phoebe a little bit, but she kind of calls him out that he's Clay, he always has strings attached, and that is when he brings up the fact that he has an urn that he claims he got at an outdoor market that he needs sold, which is when she goes to Phoebe. Goes to Prue to sell it. But he's like a minor love interest of Phoebe's. And I was debating with myself on whether or not this would count as a supporting relationship. However, what I ultimately decided is while I do think it is a bit of a supporting relationship development, it also has the supporting relationship breakup, which would basically cancel each other out. So I decided to leave it off of the list. But he is also kind of like a single episode minor love interest, and he is considered, well, not considered, he is Phoebe's ex from New York, who she dated while she was there. And that's worth 1 point. We then have a multi-episode supporting character introduced, which is Claire Price, who, as mentioned before, was sent by the bank to take over the auction house now that Rex and Hannah have kicked the bucket, so to speak. And again, she's very hardline, making the tough choice. Are we keeping it open? Are we not? She's all business, no nonsense. But she does also follow through when she says you need 1.2 million to keep it open, and Prue earns that, even though Prue almost sold something that was illegal. She keeps her word, and the auction house lives to see another day, but she seems like she'd be a very tough boss, a very girl boss character, if you will. I hate that term though. Oh, well, I already said it, so it's there. And that was worth 2 points, so that brings us to a total of 3 points so far. We then have our multi-season main character growth. And this is another one that I was debating with myself. Do I include it? Do I not include it? Ultimately, I decided to. Basically, why I decided to include it is when you see gradual changes episode to episode, sometimes they're easy to miss when, a character has become more mature or has had like some, yeah, I think an increase in maturity is the right word for it. And sometimes it's when they bring in like a different character from a previous time and you see or hear about the differences in the interactions between them that you kind of can highlight that subtle growth that maybe went unnoticed before. And I felt like in this episode, Clay did that for Phoebe. Clay's presence, he's from her past in New York when they're reminiscing about how, you know, back in the day she'd work 3 jobs just to keep up with her social schedule. She lived beyond her means. They, were always out having fun. He was kind of the bad boy, blah, blah, blah. Like all of these reminiscings of how she was in New York, how she is now, kind of him pointing out that, wow, you've changed. And even her kind of realizing, wow, I have changed so much from who I was back then. His presence and him knowing her before the series and kind of in those first early episodes where she was kind of more immature really highlights how much she has grown in the last 11 episodes into like a more mature person who's, what's the word I'm looking for? Who's on the path to what we know as rewatchers she will become later on. But her being a witch has obviously changed her, her saving people, her living back with her sisters. All of these things have impacted her. She's grown as a person. This episode highlights that. That's why I decided to include it. Though there was nothing like stark or really obvious about it, it was more that contrast between Clay's impression of her and who we know her to have become. That is why I included it. 4 points, bringing us to 7. And then the final positive for this episode was world building, which is also worth 4 points, bringing us to 11. And that is the fact that this is the first time where the sisters' powers have not worked on the big baddie. The Guardian of the Urn was completely immune to Prue's powers when she tried to move her. She would just basically like turned her head a bit, but otherwise stood fast on the ground where she was no movement. And this is the first time it's happened. It won't be the last. But as it is the first time we've seen it in the series, that is adding something extra to the world. And so, again, 4 points. And now we move on to the negative. So the first negative I noticed was character regression. It was very minor, but by this point, we've had so many episodes where they're like dealing with personal gain and the consequences of personal gain and how you're not supposed to be using magic beyond saving the innocent, fighting the demons and such. And while I personally think that that is unfair, because if you are given awesome powers, you should be able to gain some benefit from it if it's not hurting anybody. So I personally disagree with personal gain. but it is established that personal gain is not allowed and there are consequences to it. And Piper knows this. By this point, they have gone through it multiple times. They know about personal gains, they know about the consequences. They should know better. And the fact that they do not, or have not learned yet, I feel is character regression. But it is, again, minor because technically, if you look at it like squinting and turn your head a bit, it could be that it's not personal gain. It's helping out, and that's kind of what Piper says as well. Though, given that there are minor consequences, I'd say even the powers that be that determine personal gain is probably out on whether or not it would actually count or not, on which viewpoint to take, because there are minor consequences, but they don't fall on Piper. So either way, Piper should have known better. That's a -1, bringing us to 10. And then the second negative for this episode is the negative messaging slash behaviors. Obviously, we have Clay, and by the end of the episode, he is selfless. He saves Phoebe. The one thing he didn't lie about was how much he cared about her. But we learn that he has a criminal past. Obviously, they stole the urn. That it's theft. That is a crime. That is obviously a negative behavior. Nobody's questioning that. But there's also like the more subtle kind of negative behaviors, like the fact that he kind of manipulates Phoebe into getting in touch with her sister. Like, I'm sure he also wanted to see Phoebe because he was in the city, but there was always that secondary goal of I have something to sell. Her sister works at an auction house. If I get close to Phoebe, I get close to Prue. Was that the only motivation? No. But was it one? Yes, and that is kind of manipulative. Not to mention the fact that he then lies, he pretends he got it at a marketplace. And obviously, Prue at first is like, well, in order to sell this for you, I have to do the background work, the background check, all these other things. And Phoebe's there like, oh, I trust Clay. Skip a step or two, and that ends up with Prue trusting him enough. She still does the background check as is her due diligence, but she does, what am I trying to say? I hate it when your thoughts just boof, go away. Uh, she does background check, but she does still put it on the auction block. And as the auction is ongoing, that is when Claire brings the background check, and it does state that it was stolen. Prue quickly grabs the urn before it can actually go up on the lot, and that does lead to a little bit of comedy in the episode because the auctioneer continues to read off the list, but when he reads off the urns lot, it's actually a painting being held up, and he laughs, and so does the audience, like the audience for the auction. I didn't laugh out loud, but I was amused by it. But this is also making her an unwitting accomplice. Like if she had actually stolen that, or not stolen that, sold that, she would have been accomplice to that. And that obviously was putting her job in jeopardy, not to mention her freedom, because I'm sure that would have legal repercussions. I mean, she would have done so unknowingly, but given that they did get the background check in time, she obviously takes it off the lot. But even then, she compromises her morals and her ethics because instead of immediately handing it over to the police, she's now in the position where she doesn't want Phoebe to get in trouble. And so she hesitates to hand it over to the authorities, keeping it in her office. Luckily, though, once Clay overcomes the curse, the guardian, and the urn that's attached to it does make its way back to Egypt, back to its rightful owner, magically. So it's out of her hands at that point. But again, these are just negative behaviors, one of which is criminal, the other one's maybe just not very ethical. And that is, again, worth -2 points. And so overall, the objective score for this episode is an 8 out of 10. As a reminder of our mostly objective rankings so far, In first place, we have Something Wicked This Way Comes, I've Got You Under My Skin, Wicked Envy, Dead Men Dating. This episode comes into fifth place, Feats of Clay, and then Dream Sorcerer, The Witch is Back, Thank You for Not Morphing, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, The Wedding from Hell, and in last place is The Fourth Sister. So now we come to the personal ranking, and this, of course, is just my personal opinion on where the episode should fall. Now, this one was difficult for me because I was like, I like some things about it, I don't like things about it, but I want to try to be fair about it. In the end, I'll be honest, I chose the ranking based on the other episodes that were around it. I liked it more than this episode, but less than this episode, so that's where it ended up. And it just so happened that both of those episodes that I was debating between happened to have the same score, which gave this one its score. But I will call out kind of some of the things I liked. I really liked The Guardian of the Urn, specifically what they did with the voice. They like kind of gave it this echoey quality, and it just sounded really awesome. Like it was a great auditory experience. And I also like, obviously, all of the jangling jewelry. I don't like the cape thing in the costume. Like the cape thing that's kind of like supposed to be a top. I'm just sitting there like, if that actress raised her arms just a little bit, it would have been like rated R. So, not a big fan of that. But I love all the jewelry and the gold. I love the hair, the echoing of the voice. I also love how when she's punishing them for their greed, she basically uses various items of jewelry that are part of her costume, and she'll kind of like rub her fingers on it. There'll be like this golden sand, and then she'll like just throw the sand, and it'll then create the creature that was on whatever jewelry she had. She had like a kind of like a wraparound bracelet to be the snake, a ring for the spider, and I think the scorpion was on a necklace, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken on that one, honestly. I forget at this point. It's been like all of 17 minutes since I watched the episode, so it's already out of my head already. And I'm repeating myself as well. But anyways, I really like this character. I also love that they never had to vanquish her. I mean, they couldn't, their powers didn't work on her, but like technically she's not evil. She is a guardian, which implies a certain level of goodness. She punishes the greedy who steal the urn, which, fair play, greed is one of the seven deadly sins, which is noted in the episode when they are trying to figure out what to do about the guardian. There's nothing on the guardian in the book, but the book does mention the seven deadly sins and how greed is countered by a selfless act, which is what they think should happen. Of course, Clay comes to that conclusion, well, instinctively. He goes to sacrifice himself because he doesn't want Phoebe or the sisters to get hurt by the Guardian. And it is when they come to save him that he then protects them, putting his arm in the path of the Cobra so that Phoebe doesn't get hurt, which is self-sacrificial and selfless, and therefore earns basically back his life from the Guardian. And having now taken care of the other two thieves, her job is done, and she returns to basically a stamp on the urn, which then returns back to Egypt, back to where we saw Clay take it at the beginning of the episode. I have to admit, though, the urn, it is pretty. Like, it's a beautiful blue, gold all over it. But what I hate about it is that stupid stamp. I mean, the stamp when it's on the crate that has a coffin in it from the first man that was killed, Wesley. It didn't look bad there. It doesn't look bad on the back of Palmer's door, but when it goes onto the urn, it just looks out of place because it looks like it should be like a sign on a door or a stamp on a crate. It does not look like a decorative item on this otherwise very decorated urn. It just kind of, I felt, contrasted too much with the other designs that were on the urn to look out of place. But that's just an aesthetic thing. It's not really relevant to the plot. We, of course, need to talk about the fact that I'm a little bit on the shallow side, and I really appreciate when there are beautiful people on the screen. You know, it gives your eyes something to look at. And honestly, when you are having had a stressful day at work and you're just looking to unwind and you just want to escape into a TV show, into a fantasy, into an alternate reality that is on your TV in your show, having beautiful people there is a positive. And you're never going to know these people as like individuals anyways, so really judging them by their looks is kind of the baseline because that's what you see of them. And Clay is a very good looking man. So I appreciated that. I didn't appreciate the spicy scenes. Honestly, I really am one of those people who's a bit of a prude, and I really don't need that. I mean, if it's a cute romance, sure. I understand why it's there. I understand why they put it in there. But I don't need that to be satisfied with an episode. Like, I don't need these spicy scenes intermixed. That's not what I watched the show for. That's not really a main piece. I watched the show for the supernatural element, for the drama between the sisters, for their daily life drama, not so much for the spicy stuff. Even with their like long-term couples that their main relationships throughout the series. I'm like, I don't need the spicy scenes. And I'm lucky that this came out when it did because unlike in today's, there's a reason I rewatch older shows. Let's just say that. In today's, they probably would have gone further with the spicy scenes. So I like that they didn't go too far with them. Everybody's covered. It's more implied than anything. But honestly, I could have done without it. I didn't think it added anything to the episode. Though, like again, Clay is a very good-looking man, so make of that what you will. Obviously, there's a little bit of a through line with kind of Prue's personality and how Piper knows all these things about Phoebe's life in New York, including that Clay was her ex, whereas Prue had no idea. And this, of course, is said that the reason that Prue didn't know is that Phoebe never told her because she can be a little bit judgmental and she's also kind of interfering, which we do kind of see throughout the episode how, you know, she's giving opinions on Clay, she's giving opinions where they aren't asked for, even about, you know, Piper's little drama with Doug and Shelley. And then at the end of the episode, even, she's the one who goes over once Piper freezes them and basically takes the ring out of Doug's pocket, puts it on the floor so that Shelley can find it and they can see if they're going to be together because she can't help herself from interfering, which I found to be a likable aspect of the character, to be honest. Which brings us to Doug and Shelley. Doug at first seems like such a sweet guy. And then not Prue, Piper casts a confidence spell. She doubles the recipe. And I don't begrudge anybody having the confidence. Like having that confidence boost, I think was well deserved. He seemed like a sweet guy at first. But I do find it distasteful how after he gained his confidence, he completely was like, I was so in love and heartsick over this girl. She's the one. She was who he wanted to marry. But now that I'm confident, I'm just going to go out and have a bunch of flings because people are actually showing interest. It cheapens the love story that they were telling between those two characters, which was actually the nicer love story than Clay and Phoebe. Like Doug and Shelley, I was rooting for them until that moment, and then I'm like, so confidence equals douchebag? Like, you can't commit to somebody because you have confidence? I don't know why they correlated those two things, but it annoyed me. It cheapened the character, it cheapened the love story, and even after, and then once the spell was reversed, obviously Doug went back to his other self, but you can't forget that he had that douchebaggery in him. So even though it's a happy ending and you kind of awe over it, it's just cheapened. And this is exactly what they did with Dead Man Dating too. The reason why that one did not score as high as it should have is again they had to cheapen the romantic emotional side of things by trying to make it physical when there was no possibility of that. With this one, they had again a beautiful little love story, a little love snippet, if you will, and instead of being able to see like, oh, this nice guy who found the one, lacked the courage, and then finally he has the courage and they end up happy together. You have that thing in between where you're like, just think if this guy ever got actual confidence, like if he did that naturally instead of spell-based, he'd probably dump her. He'd cheat on her. He's an asshole. An a-hole, I should say. But it cheapened the whole thing. I did not enjoy that at all. And then there's also the fact that like there were no personal gain consequences, even though Piper was doing it so she wouldn't have to fire him, so her job would be easier. So her job as at the restaurant could save money on all of the dishes that he was breaking. That's very selfish. It could be construed, like I said, if you squint and tilt your head a bit, maybe you could say, well, it's for him, it's giving him confidence so that he can, get back together with his girlfriend. She's helping him. But again, once she does the spell, he becomes a douchebag. Now, having said that, I am willing to give a little bit of grace here, a little bit, for the fact that maybe the personal gain consequences were his disloyalty to the one that he loved because he was under the spell. But in that case, it's like usually the personal gain consequences should have fallen on Piper, not on Doug. So I'll speculate that, and it makes me feel a little bit better about the ending, but at the same time, we don't know if that's the case or not. And then, honorable mention, Andy appears in the episode for like 2 minutes. When Palmer dies, he's the one who investigates that, finds Prue's card within his pocket, goes to the office, says, hey, do you know this dude Palmer? He died with your card in his pocket. And she goes, oh, well, there was an auction. So I met a lot of people. And then he goes, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll bring a picture later. And then he's never seen again on the episode. What happened to his investigation? We will never know. But I thought it was worth mentioning that he did appear in the episode. He just did not play any sort of meaningful role within this episode. So, having said all that, I liked this episode less than Dream Sorcerer, but more than Thank You for Not Morphing, which made this episode a 7 out of 10. And as a reminder of our ranking so far, we have Dead Man Dating in first place, The Witch is Back, Wicca Envy, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, Something Wicca This Way Comes, Dream Sorcerer. In 7th place, we have Feats of Clay, Thank You for Not Morphing, I've Got You Under My Skin, The Wedding from Hell, and then the worst episode of this entire series, The Fourth Sister, in last place, Where It Will Always Be. Which brings us now to our series ranking so far. The series ranking is basically where we're going to be ranking each of the seasons against each other, and we determine the season's overall percentage score based on what we rate each episode as we go. So with 8 out of 10 on our mostly objective list, we are now up to 70 out of 220. And then on the personal side, we have added 7 for a total of 71 out of 220. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Season 1, Episode 11 of Charmed, Feats of Clay. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.